evening, ladies and gentlemen, and it's such a delight to see so many of you here today. This is episode 9 of Moksha Talks, and we are in conversation with Dr. Veena Sen and Dr. Madhurima Vidyarthi. May I have a round of applause for that? Our topic for today is looking beyond labels, a conversation about people with disabilities. Before we plunge into this episode, today is also World Music Day, and I thought I would play a song which is kind of appropriate for the occasion. So let's begin with that, maybe not the whole song, but at least a little bit of it.
Do you see me as an equal? In your eyes do I unfold? Do you see me for the person that I am? Do you see me as an equal, free of labels, names and signs? I'm living well and whole here in my plan. They say don't judge the books just by their covers. How can we do less by sisters and brothers? For we are truly equal, one people just the same. Let's love each other as we are, living on this plane. Did you know that human difference is the way we're meant to be? But only when we know that are we whole. For our differences make us stronger, each with our abilities, and together we comprise one family whole. They say don't judge the books just by their covers. How can we do less by sisters and brothers? For we are truly equal, one people just the same. Let's love each other as we are, living on this plane. It's true here in me and there in you. Just behind we can see what we can do. Together we can truly be known for our abilities.
Thank you, Creative Arts Academy, once again, for allowing us to host this series of talks here. So we are very, very grateful to Ramanjit and team, and for everyone who's involved for inviting us here. I am Shampa Mukherjee. I have been told by countless people that I should introduce myself, because apparently in one of the episodes for Macbeth, a friend of mine was the guest, and somebody told her, please tell Moksha Mukherjee that. So I'm not Moksha Mukherjee, this is Moksha Talks, I'm Shampa Mukherjee. So just clarification. And I keep forgetting that this is not just for people who are sitting here, this is also for a very wider audience in the YouTube circle. So yes, I think I should introduce myself, but I'm still not used to it. I keep forgetting. Dr. Sen, Dr. Veena Sen. She has an MA and a PhD in education from the Department of Psychology and Special Educational Needs, University of London Institute of Education. She completed her B.Ed from Loreto College, Kolkata. She's a founder member of Indian Institute of Cerebral Palsy, ISCP, and held several posts. She retired in 2018 as the Executive Director. During a 5-year stint in Kochi, Kerala, she co-founded Raksha, Society for Children with Multiple Disabilities. She continues to be on the governing body of IICP, and her present designation is Honorary Secretary. Since 2018, Dr. Sen has worked as a consultant in Modern High School for girls. She taught psychology in classes 11 and 12 and life skills from class 6 to 12. At present, she is the head of the Department of Special Needs. This is a new program, the setting up of which she has facilitated with the aim of providing a sensitive and informed educational environment for students and need additional emotional, behavioral and learning support. There is more, but I want to straight plunge into how I know her. She and I were colleagues when we were teaching in MACE, which is Modern Academy of Continuing Education. It was a part of Modern High School, and we were training teachers, aspiring teachers, and she taught a different module, I taught a different module. It's not that we met very often, but we did meet at faculty meetings and other meetings, and it was always fun. And I've always wanted to have this kind of a chat thing with her, so I'm very grateful that it is happening today. And it is about a subject which she obviously is, you know, she owns. So, yeah. An applause for her, please. Dr. Madhurima Vidyarthi. In her day job, Madhurima is an endocrinologist trained in Kolkata and London and a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians. You know, it's very interesting. She's a doctor. Her CV has just this one line which mentions that she's a doctor. The rest of it is all about her writing. I found that hilarious. She has always been a passionately committed writer. Over the years, she has written in many formats, articles for the Statesman, Kolkata, scripts for educational documentaries, for St. Xavier's College, Kolkata, and for a CD-ROM created by Price Waterhouse, on Shuklajit Ray, narrated by Sir Richard Attenborough. But her enduring love has always been fiction. She writes across a range of genres and other groups. Mundi Monster is her second book for young readers, published in February 2023, and her first run was My Grandmother's Masterpiece, published in February 2022. She's slated for 2 releases in 2024, both are in the historical fiction genre. How she finds the time to read history up also, I have no idea. One for young adults and the other one is for adults. Once more, there are other things which I don't want to read, but I know her because she was a student at Modern High School when I was a teacher, and it's going to be a lifelong regret that she was never in my class. I technically can't really call her a student, but then I do remember that she used to, you know, those were lovely days in the MHS when students got prizes, books, not certificates, not excellence and all of that. It was books. And I think she never came off the stage without a whole bunch of them, you know, staggering out of the stage literally, because she, except for GP2, which she couldn't possibly win because she got GP1, she got everything else that she studied. So it must have been horrible to be in her class because you knew that you would never ever get a prize. So that's Madhurima for you, brilliant as ever, and now she's my doctor. I'm terrified of her because she doesn't allow me to
eat anything.
Yeah, well, no, that's not true. Actually, I was at Indus Valley one day for a function and made the mistake of eating a sandwich in front of her. And they were trying to tell me to eat a cupcake or something, and I couldn't. And I said, she's sitting over there, and she told me, "Kya bola chilo khete? 3 tala sandwich ta I am vegetarian." So I really had no answer to that. But then, yeah, that's who she is. So thank you so much for being here, Madhurima. A round of applause for her. Before we get into the actual discussion, I have one question to ask Dr. Sen. May I call you Reena?
Yes, please.
We are going to talk about a conversation about people with disabilities. Is there a new thing about calling them people who are differently abled? Is there something very insensitive about the word disability?
See, I think for a long time we've kind of grappled with terminology, and terminology is important. I mean, for the same reasons why you don't call black people by various derogatory terms, but I think we quibble so much about terminology, and so people with disabilities, challenge, differently able. The government has come up with Divyang.
Divyang.
So The problem is that all the energy seems to be going into terminology. Terminology works well if it goes hand in hand with civil rights, with constitutional rights, with better access. Things have to happen with attitude change, mindsets, more opportunities. Then all the quibbling about terminology actually makes sense. Otherwise, everything remains the same, and all we do is we say, oh, why have you called this person a person with disability? You should have called her differently able. How different is different? How able do we have to be considered able? And we also know that ableism, like sexism, racism, all of these things are actually considered to be words that are huge blocks to inclusion, because it is assuming that you have to have ability. So what if you don't have ability? Are you not worth anything? And that is why my student and my former colleague Jija Ghosh always used to tell me, call a spade and give us what we need. I feel terrible today because I had invited Shudipendu Dotto, my colleague, to come here, and he was going to speak a little bit. Unfortunately, I mixed up the address. I went to Red Bury instead of this other red house. There was water around. And the first thing, what's the point of quibbling about differently able if we don't have pavements where a person like Shudipendu could get down? There was water and he was scared his crutches would slip. And so he said, ma'am, I don't want to have a fall, I'm just going to go home. So that's my answer to this.
Yeah. Madhurima, you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I think, again, labels are a waste of time, because again,
any label
is a waste of time, and really, it doesn't matter what you call somebody. It's what you can actually do for them, if at all. It's actually how you can interact with them and what you think in your heart about them. That's really what matters.
True. Okay, so now to you. So, Muni Monster, would you like to tell everyone here about the character and about your book?
Okay. So, Muni Monster is my second published book. It's about a year and a half old, and it's told through the point of view of a 10-year-old whose world suddenly turns upside down when an elderly disabled relative comes to live with them. So, live in a not too big flat which already houses herself, her parents and her grandmother, and how she first resents and then adapts to this elderly relative. Now, a lot of people would say, an outsider is bad enough. This is a person she has never met in her life. An elderly addition to the family may be awkward for little children because they have their own needs perhaps. But this is a special elderly person because they're a grandmother who crawls. Now, that's how I start off my sessions in schools. How many of you have seen a grandmother who crawls? So a grandmother who crawls is perhaps not a welcome addition to any household, and that's really what the book is about.
So this, when you were thinking of the book and planning it, did you use a character like this by choice? Obviously. So what was the purpose?
There wasn't a purpose. There wasn't a purpose in the sense that it wasn't, a good deed or anything. The story came, and the story came because the main character is based loosely on my own aunt-in-law, who lives with us, whom I have seen for the last 20 years of my marriage. And the fact that I found it a huge challenge in the, not in terms of difficulty, but just in terms of interest. I found it very interesting to try and communicate with her, to try and speak her language, as it were, because it was very clear very early on that she wasn't an idiot. Okay, so she was, she had dysphasia, so when she speaks, she makes sounds, she can't form words properly, or she can't form all the words that you and I do. But it's not as if she doesn't have opinions. Obviously, if she has opinions, she has thoughts, and there is a thinking process. And there are ways in which you can have a conversation with her if you are able to frame your questions correctly. Because she's very well able to say yes, no, she's able to answer in numbers, she's able to even express opinions in short phrases. So you have to know how to overcome that challenge of communication, because essentially it is your brain communicating with their brain, and you have to find a conduit. And then you forget that they are crawling, that they look different, that whatever they used to be able to walk, now they can only crawl. And I've written that in my afterword, and I've said, think of being in a country where you don't speak the language and nobody understands
what you're saying.
Yours. If you were in Iceland, I mean, I don't know how many people in this space would be able to communicate. We would, go back to gestures and things like that. So it's no different. So the story came, and she's called Munni on occasion at home. So, and Munni Monster came, and the choice of title was very deliberate. There is sarcasm in that for those who would appreciate it. And yeah.
So when you have gone around with your book, I know that you've gone around to many schools and have done sessions there. How do you find the reaction of the children, the so-called normal?
Yeah, it varies, and a lot of children, unfortunately, don't know the term cerebral palsy. We used to, and I think it's just, and maybe it's the selection of schools, because a lot of the schools have been these very sort of elite IB or private schools, air-conditioned schools, designed to keep out heat and information and the real world. So, then you start off with saying grandmother who crawls, and there is an ew when you unveil the first picture of Munni. I usually start with this picture, and then I say who do you think is behind the curtain, and then there is a reveal of Munni's character, and then it sort of goes on from there. And there are 2 points where I ask them, do you think Munni is a monster, because of the events that happen in the book? And I ask them that again after I've finished, because at the end there are these 2 very lovely video clips that the IICP has done for me. And then there are obviously fewer numbers. There are some children, who will be contrary and say no for the heck of it. Yes, I do, simply because the others are saying no. But they get squashed by their peers. That's very interesting. So yes, I think the conversation, like any other conversation, needs to start somewhere. And there's another bit that I point out, which is disability can be acquired. I mean, if disability is just not walking normally, not talking normally, not eating normally. When we go on a family holiday, we have to take 2 wheelchairs, and one of them is for my father-in-law, who broke his neck in an accident 5 years ago. He was fine till then, he was normal till then. But now he is, he's mobile with help, he's mobile with a stick, so he's disabled. He's disabled, but he would not be called disabled in the conventional sense of the term. So I think that is also something that everybody needs to have a think about, that you get older, or there are young people who may have accidents, unfortunately. Not everybody may be born with a disability. you may pick it up as you go along.
As you go along. What is the acceptance level of your character among children, not adults?
I think they're just first fairly surprised that something like this can happen. In Calcutta, as opposed to Delhi, which is the only other place that I have been, there are children who will actually admit to having seen people like this before and admit, to maybe their parents not allowing them to interact with those other people, etc.
Oh.
Yeah. But in Delhi, it's like that they're in a cocoon. So I don't know, maybe I went to the wrong schools.
Reena, I think I remember you mentioning that you liked the role played by Mishti's mother in her book. So would you like to talk about that?
So I do believe, and I think my colleagues and old friends Ranu and Renu who are here today, and Krish, my school friend who was also sort of teaching for years as a teacher of the deaf, and my colleagues here on this side, the young ones, would all agree with me that nobody, not me, not you, not anybody, can do anything without others. You know, not a single person can be independent. We are all interdependent. What the Africans call, which Desmond Tutu used to call Ubuntu. Ubuntu is, this whole thing that whatever we do, no matter how talented we are or how gifted we are, or on the other hand, how many limitations, frailties or disabilities we have, we need others. We cannot do this on our own. And Madhurima's book, the one thing that I was just thinking about is that the characters were so real, because there is this little girl who's just fighting for her space. Because now that I teach kids this from class 6 upwards, they kind of like to talk about, ma'am, nobody allows me my space. I don't have any privacy anymore.
My
kind of
my
thing.
4-year-old granddaughter says the same thing.
So that's Mishti, the character. And then there is her friend Ria, who's one smarty pants, who's kind of say, fix her, fix this Munni monster of yours, get her out, do things that'll chase her out. What is lovely is the role of the parents. Because they're there, they're very affectionate, they are very supportive of Mishti, but their ground rule, their code of conduct, of inclusiveness does not change under any circumstances. Mishti's mother never raises her voice. She's the kind of mother I would aspire to be. I'm the kind of mother who, like an octopus, would like 8 legs so that I could slap 8 times. I read that on some WhatsApp and I said, gosh, this describes me as a mother. So Mishti's mother is my antithesis, who kind of says without losing her sense of humor. There are times when she's finding it very difficult. It's not that she's some superwoman who doesn't find things, but they just have that inclusiveness, that if this is a home not just for you, it's for us all, and that is not going to change. I think that's what really appealed to me about the adults in this, the Thamma, everybody, they love the child. It's not that they love Mishti any less, but they're so clear with the kind of values they want to instill in this child. And I just want to say one thing about labels. To me, labels are like, Madhurima said that, labels, she feels labels have no use. I feel labels are like, they have a good and a bad side. Because now that I'm working with kids who are now going to sit for examinations, they're board examinations, class 10, class 12. Because of labels, the council is going to give them certain concessions. You know, it's like anything, you know, a label should be, it should enable. A label should not set you apart. But if that label gets you what is owed to you, because in any kind of if we look at equitable distribution rather than equality, it's very, very important that you should get what you need, that reasonable accommodation which our Disability Act talks about. That everybody can't get everything, but everybody should get what you need. And if that label, if that ADHD or if that dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia or whatever this, I don't really care, if that gives you extra time, if it gives you a writer, if it gives you the right to use a device, then that kind of labeling, I think, is useful. Thing. But if it's discriminating, if it's prejudicial, then of course what Madhurima says is absolutely right.
I remember when I was teaching in international school, we had children with issues. So very often the parents would come and request, you know, that we write to the board, and they would give them extra time, etc. And I thought that was really helpful, because some of them were very, very good students.
Yeah.
And it would be criminal that because of their whatever problem they had, that they wouldn't get the grades that they deserved. So yeah, I completely agree that label, if it is enabling, then yes, it's a fantastic idea. And to go back to the book, I love the bit about the bed. Yeah. And how she hated it when her bed was taken away.
That's the space.
And you know, it kind of resonates with me, because my grandparents had that kind of a 4-poster beautiful bed, and it was taken away by one of my aunts, and I was too small to take part in family politics. Not that I take part in family politics as I've grown up, but then I wish I could have yelled and shouted and told my dad that you can't give it away or whatever. But I loved that bed, so it completely resonated. Like your first book, my granny was a painter. She was an artist and self-taught. Completely, comes from that kind of Dhaka background. Not in touch with Kolkata life at all. But she used to do these paintings. And when I read that book, I continuously thought about it. I said, yeah, thank you. Okay, confession time. Until I went to IICP last year, and Madhumita had invited me to come. I think you all told me it was Founders Day. What was it? Founders Day, the exhibition. And this is confession, I am not good with the children with special needs, because I just find myself going to either extreme. Either I go, oh, and then I start crying, which is not good. Or I don't know how to deal with them, which is not good either. So that one trip to that place, and when I met those children and some of them sang for me, one of them cannot speak at all and wanted to say hello to me, so he had a board, and with his feet he kind of punched in the alphabets, and I was completely zapped. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in my life, and I thought, oh my God, and then I thought of the teachers, and I could have put a halo around each one of them, because in a normal school, when you're losing your temper every 5 minutes, with 45 of them screaming at you or whatever, not at you, with you, screaming in your absence, in your presence. So it's just very, very hard. But the kind of commitment that I saw, and the kind of kindness that I saw, I would love to use that word.
Yeah.
The way they went about the children, and the way they talked to them and told them that here is our visitor, you want to explain this to her, how the rocket launches, and I'm thinking, rocket? And yeah, they showed me how everything happens and how science works, and I am a big pundit in science, but it didn't matter because I didn't understand what he was saying. And it was a life-changing experience, seriously it was. And I have so much respect for people who have chosen to be. I was talking to your young colleagues a little while ago, and they told me how they work, and it's so wonderful, really. And you have spent your whole life with them, Reena. You also need a halo. Could you tell us about disability? I know it's a huge subject. You don't want to talk about the science and all of it, but just generally what you feel is, what we come across in daily life, or as students, what is it that we are looking at, how should we address it, etc.
Yeah, it is rather a
It's a
question.
huge subject. You can give us, just a little bit about it. I don't want to get into all the scientific terms.
The way I look at it after several decades of sort of life in IICP is that I think most of us would agree that the one thing that we all feel is that they're basically people. And I think that is what is the most, it's now called person first philosophy. We can call it by, very, very large, impressive sounding names. But I think what Ranu, me, Renu, all of us have kind of realized is that, right in the beginning, whether it was Ranu or me or Renu, we didn't really know anything about disability. Frankly speaking, I didn't know much about anything, really. I mean, I just went in as a volunteer. So I kind of learnt on the job. But I think the one thing that was there right from the beginning, because I met Sudha Kaul, who's the founder of the organization, and her little son Arjun, when I got married. So I met Arjun when he was about 2.5 or 3 years old, and he was this lovely looking child, and I knew so little about, so-called typical development that he really didn't seem that off the mark to me, because I hadn't really met that many kids myself. So I think right from the beginning, we dealt with the kids like kids. I think we made mistakes. We didn't really know too many technical words, but I think our hearts were in the right place. We were willing to learn. We worked at it. We didn't leave it there. We all studied. We all kind of got our kind of technical qualifications, because that was important. And I think right from there has been this conviction that when you treat people as people, then you are no longer either sort of overwhelmed, emotionally overwhelmed, and neither do you shrink away in some kind of fear or trepidation or anything. Because we as a society have got so track-bound, much as we talk about diversity, we are uncomfortable with diversity. It's good in the books. It's fine to talk about LGBTQA rights till your child says, I'm gay. Okay,
Correct.
Mother, deal with it. It's fine to actually say that, differently abled people must have equal rights. But when a person who only has crutches and puts their name in a dating site, when they get only rejects, you realize how uncomfortable we are with any small thing that is different. So I think what our work, and I'm talking on behalf of all my friends and colleagues who are there and we from ISCP and other places, is that whenever we have reached out to people as human beings first, I have realized that IQ is it can just lull you into such a stupid place. Because so many of our kids, if you test their IQs, it would say it's untestable because you can't go lower than that. When we have discovered them as human beings, oh my God, it's been just amazing. I mean, you know, I talk about Arjun because he's like my teacher, because through him I've learned so many things. When you talk about descriptors, severe to profound, very profound, these are meaningless, because when I know him as a person, and when he knew that my husband liked his drink and he used to take Ashish straight to the bar, I mean, what does that untestable IQ tell you about this person? I mean, he's got the best association that I have met in many people. He never forgets a face. And getting a compliment from him, he says, he does this, which says, I like you, or I think you're pretty. I still crave for it. Because I actually dress up when I go downstairs to Sudha's place sometimes, only for Arjun to recognize me, but he likes them young. So I'm kind of, my shelf life is kind of done and dusted. So, but he's not the only one. Ranu, we've got so many. I mean, I remember Pintu Agarwal, who was Renu's favorite, I think. And again, these were kids who had these labels, severe, profound. But when you kind of reached out to them as people, it was just such an amazingly wonderful relationship. So I think the most important thing that I have learned is, I think we ought to treat human beings as human beings. We need to be comfortable with the fact that if we look at life as an ecosystem, then even the most fragile, even the most frail has the right to thrive and to be nurtured and to have an environment where they can be themselves, as able as they wish or as disabled or whatever we want to call. And I think most of us, ISCP, brings out the best version of ourselves. That's why I go back. Every week I go back actually. And that helps me to be a better teacher in modernized school as well. Because somehow ISCP has taught me to be kinder, more compassionate, with my bad temper and everything. That's there. We won't talk about that. I mean, my colleagues still know, when I go off the handle. But in general, I think working with people, working with anybody who needs that extra bit from you brings out the best in you. That's what I genuinely believe. I think working in ISCP made me look after my mother-in-law better than I would when she got so ill. I think when my husband got really ill, I think it helped me because we had learnt about, working with people who needed that extra bit of assistance. And it just makes you a better human being.
So this is what you meant when you said that you have to look beyond diagnostic labels and IQ scores and all of that. Yeah. But Reena, don't you think this is true even in a normal classroom?
Oh, yeah.
When the teacher is actually trying to look at the student and reach out on a personal level, on an emotional level, I think it always works because the student also knows that maybe that child is brilliant or not brilliant or just average or whatever, but the fact that the teacher is interested in me, I think it does make a difference.
Oh yes, because just today we were having a discussion on school mental health. We've done this webinar with Shekhar Sheshadri of Nimhans, and one of the things that we talked about in school today, that it's so important to shift the emphasis from what's wrong with you to why has this happened? How, what is it? And not look beyond the you as to the environment. So kindness, little bit of kindness goes a long way. And in fact, one of the case studies that Shekhar Sheshadri talked about was how this young man who had very challenging childhood, a very difficult childhood, had actually finished with school. He had finished school, he had gone to America, he was a very successful man, and then he comes back and he goes back to his school and he looks for a particular teacher. A teacher who had taught him like years and years and years ago. And she's forgotten all about him. But he goes back and he says, "Ma'am, I just wanted to come and meet you because when I was going through a terrible day, you very quietly pulled me to one side and you just said, 'What is the matter? Can I just help you? Or would you like to talk about it?'" He said, "Ma'am, you've moved on. You've taught so many children. For me, I've never forgotten that." So, I think it applies to every place. A workplace, a little bit of kindness, a little bit of compassion, it goes a long way. And of course it applies to our schools. Because sometimes achievement and thriving should not become mutually exclusive. Even if it doesn't matter if you're not an achiever, you still need to thrive. You still need to have agency. You still need to be recognized as a person. It doesn't matter what your marks are.
When I was doing this research, I found that there are 3 areas that we need to work on. Correct me if I'm wrong. One is with ourselves, that we need to teach ourselves how to deal with children of this kind or adults of this kind, and teach ourselves new lessons in patience. The second one is the next generation which is coming up, to teach them to be more empathetic. And I think the last one, and I think that's a very important area, is teachers. Because if you have a set of mixed children in your class, you need to be able to design your lessons in a way where everybody is included, physically, emotionally, or wherever. So how much of my reading of this is correct or not? Or Madhurima, do you want to answer?
I can't talk about teaching, can I?
But you can talk about medical education.
No, I can talk about dealing with people.
Yeah, and I could carry on from that.
My training professionally, I deal with a variety of people who are at different, to put it very crudely, at different mental and physical levels, right? And the training has been such that when we were training in London, they kept trying to emphasize that the most important part of medical training was communication. And that has stood me in very good stead. It's like Robin Williams says, always, always, always be kind. I think as long as you remember that, there but for the grace of God, go I. It could have been me on the other side. It could have been me who was on the other side of the table waiting for someone to be kind. I think that's all you need. Obviously there is the technical training and the specialized training, but for volunteers, for us as people, for doctors, because I work in diabetes, I am able to tell my patients that This is not a one size fits all. It has to be tailored to your system, the way your diabetes works, what your sugars do for you, your lifestyle, your choices, things like that. And I don't see how that is different when we are working with disabled people. I mean, I did not choose to work with disabled people. I chose to marry into a family. It was a very conscious choice. And I have not one but two disabled aunts-in-law who live with us, who are part of our family.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing them a favor, really. They're part of the family. I inherited them in a manner of speaking, but they are two very different people. And it's been great fun trying to communicate with them, not to manage them as one would a fractious baby. No, you have to communicate with them. Sometimes you have to negotiate with them. If Munni Monster if she's having a tantrum, I deal with her exactly the way I deal with my children when they're having a tantrum. I stand in front of her, she's bawling her eyes out, there is a pause, and I say, have you finished? And she says, yes. I said, well, can I wipe your face? I wipe her face and I say, have you finished? Can we move on to the next topic? And she says, yes. So I think anybody would sense whether or not you are treating them with respect. And once you've found that key, they will want to communicate with you. They will want to perhaps do as you ask them. Ask, not tell them to do. I mean, you can't boss a 5-year-old around. You can put down ground rules for them. I have put down ground rules for Munni Monster. And I say, I will not listen to you if you continue to shout. I mean, my mother-in-law, poor thing, she gets impatient and she screams at her little sister, and that is their equation. But with me, I know it's not going to work because Munni Monster can, she can give you back scream for scream, decibel for decibel, beautifully. So I say, I will not speak to you until you have stopped, until you make sense.
So this Jugalbandi stops because you are the patient one.
No, I think it stops because she has understood that I have put down certain limits, certain rules of behavior, and if she is going to get what she wants, she will have to play by those rules. She can continue to scream, that is a choice. And this is where again this is that evidence of intelligence, that I want this. She will give it to me, but she will give it if I play by her rules, which is what we do in parenting. Of course. And that is a deal. You do this and I will give you this. We're negotiating all the time, aren't we? And that's how I will deal with Munni Monster. You go into your room and turn off the air conditioning because it is 18 degrees outside, then you will get a treat. Or if it's 9 o'clock at night, we finish dinner and she starts howling and saying, roll khabo, one of her favorites. And I said, ekhon khabe? And she says, no, because obviously she knows we've all eaten. And I said, well, don't cry now. Cry tomorrow when I can get the roll. So, and she has understood that I will not be moved by further bawling. And I will not bawl back at her. So I think in 20 years
you've come to that understanding.
We've come to that understanding, and I think I am able to communicate with her too.
So this is that's what I meant, that you have to first teach yourself. So this is what you taught yourself, how to deal with them, right?
Deal na, mane oi jeta ami bollam. I think it is, the question is, this is a person, I am a person.
How best?
How best, which is what we do when we start a job, which is what you do when you walk into a classroom. I mean, you're dealing with 40 kids at the same time. You go into a new hospital, you have a new patient whom you don't know. It is no different to any of those situations. The first day is the worst, and then it gets better.
And I think it's very important not to romanticize our work.
Yeah.
Because, this whole thing of, this beliefs, every person with Down syndrome can sing, every person with something can dance.
Or paint.
I mean, Ranu and I have met many. I mean, Tessa always used to, my friend Tessa, who she was the common sense person around. And sometimes, you know, I'd hear singing and I'd say, it's actually really quite nice. She said, absolutely not. It's not nice, it's quite tuneless. Would you accept this from other people? So, you know, our standards should not become, we should not become over romantic and you know, like Ranu is a absolute expert in behavior management, and some of the things that she's actually taught us, things like, you know, the value of ignoring and walking away, you know, because otherwise, you know, earlier it was, oh my God, no child with disability should cry. And they were the first ones who got it. So they bawl and they throw tantrums because initially it was, oh my God, what will people say? These poor kids with disability.
You're being cruel to them.
And then of course we learned that either it was them being on top of us or you know, we managing to teach anything. And that is this thing. You know, we can't romanticize this thing. We have to just
take away your halo for a minute.
Please take it away.
And take it away and say that it's fine to lose your temper, to feel exasperated, to sort of say, why did I get into this? I mean, you know,
I think you're describing an average teacher.
Yeah.
No, I think any average human being. No, I am just moving on from, you know, the sort of comment you know, that you made about the teachers having vast reserves of kindness. Kindness is all very well, but at the end of the day, there is a limit to endurance. And you know, if you judge this situation, say by a certain standard, maybe about how you would deal with your children or the feelings you have for your children. You probably love them the most in the world, but you get constantly exasperated, annoyed, mad at them. So it is therefore okay to experience those same feelings while working with anybody else.
Accepting there has to be a boundary. Because what you can get away with your own child,
you cannot.
You have to have the boundaries as to where I must stop.
No, I'm talking
think
about
that's
experiencing
very
the
important.
emotion. Experiencing the very human emotion of getting fed up and saying, I really don't want to do this anymore.
And I feel burnt out.
You already answered a part of it, but I still want to ask you about the next generation, our students, our children. How do we teach them about empathy, or do you need to teach them about empathy, or should we hope that they learn on their own? What is it? Is there a formula? Is there something we can do?
The only formula is by example.
By example.
An experience.
An experience. So, by example, again by, you know, like we teach them to read, and we read ourselves constantly, we stay off our devices, and we hope they will also read. And by not being afraid to talk about things.
Yes.
So, if they see something, anything on TV, on YouTube, on the road, and say, what is this? Instead of saying, I will tell you when you are 18, you say, this is this. I may tell you 2 degrees now, and I will give you more information later. Having said which, it doesn't mean a thing, because they'll just Google it. So it is better to open those conduits of conversation at home. And also,
and they get the correct information instead of
should certainly hope so. But it's also very important to maybe not monitor what they read. And I'm saying, and this is a very specific point I'm making, because a lot of schools are not picking up on school libraries, which is where you get exposed to a lot of things for the very first time, are not picking up books with diversity. So inclusions, LGBTQ, same-sex marriages. Indian Kidlit by Indian authors has exploded with beautiful content, very good quality content. I'm not saying that because I've got 2 books out, but even people before me have been doing stellar work about highlighting our society, people like us, problems in our society, all the different people who make up our society, not just the epics or folklore or mythology, but real people in real time with real life problems. That is what we need to get them to read. We need to bring those into schools, and not have them read about locked castles and whatever.
But we also need schools to open.
That is true.
Open their doors.
Yeah.
Much more than they are doing.
Yeah.
We need, if you grow together, you become friends, you accept each other. We are still very reticent. All schools are very reticent about inclusion. Somehow this feeling, we are not ready, we don't have the infrastructure. Within our classes, we have enough diversity anyway.
Yeah.
It's actually, the thing is that if there's a kid in a wheelchair, when there is a child with an invisible disability like dyslexia, you don't even know.
Correct.
So what is the problem about having those kids with disability right from nursery, so that your teachers are more comfortable, your parents are more comfortable, your kids are more comfortable, because then they grow together, and then it's no longer making an effort. You don't have to arrange play dates because they are playmates anyway.
But then the teachers have to be ready first.
But
No, I'll give you
how ready is ready?
No, there are levels and levels. I was at a school in Gurgaon, which again is one of these really fancy schools, and I was playing the second clip. The second clip is it's a lovely video in which the staff and the students of IICP have reacted to the book. So they are using their aids. There is Putul and Aryan and everybody whom a lot of you know, who are expressing in their own way what they thought of the story. And in the middle of one, this teacher comes up to me and says, "Oh, so-and-so teacher says the video should be switched off because they should not be exposed to so much. There is no need." And I said, "Well, I'll do it, but I will also tell you this. These are the same children who are watching porn on their mobile phones."
Yeah, true.
So, it's no water off my back, but this is what it's like.
Yeah, you have to have special resources, of course. But sometimes that becomes the reason why we keep people out. Rather than putting the resources to bring people in. I think that's very important.
Okay, now that all of us have got a bit about understanding this entire business, what is the approach? What are the tangible things that can be done, told, applied in adult life with teachers? Because I go back to that, because I think that's where most children are learning so much, good, bad, whatever. A teacher can, actually make a difference. So what are the things? How should we approach this? How should we? Because lecturing will not help. So what? Again, you did mention that by example. What is there anything else?
But I think you need the law. I'm sorry.
What is the law?
The thing is that whichever country, wherever huge advances have been made in social change, there is a law that works, so that people with disability and their parents can actually have we have a disability law, but there are no penalties. It is up to people to use it or not use it there is no strict application of the law. Whereas in countries where things have happened, firstly, the civil rights movements have been very, very, very powerful. Our people need to be taught to protest and to demand their own rights. Because too long, we are very accepting as a society because of the vast differences of caste and creed and everything. So people who are down there, the 350 or 400 million people, it's no small number, they are just so used to remaining there and rationalizing it, karma or whatever, this is our place. Protesting or putting your foot down is not part of our culture. But if we have to have social change, somewhere having a strong law which gives you access to your rights, which demands that all teachers must be trained in diversity. Things that are going to make real changes in real people's lives. There has to be the backbone of something that people can fall back on. It cannot only be, the really good, nice people like Amita Prasad who will do anything to make inclusion happen. I'm not joking. This is in dead serious.
Another halo.
But the truth is this, that, there has to be a strong law.
I need to understand this a little better. So there is a law here in our country, but people are not aware of it?
No, because there are no checks and balances. There is an architecture law that any new building has to have ramps. The new, our Chief Minister's greatest pride, what's it called? No, Donodhan, no. No, that new auditorium, it's inaccessible. We are going to have a concert soon. And we did an access audit. In fact, Shudipendra, I just miss him so much today. He went, the bathrooms, there is a ridge. No one with a wheelchair can go to it. The dressing rooms are there are like 4 or 5 steps. It's almost like, oh, but disabled people cannot act, so why do we need to think about the green room being about them? These assumptions cannot happen. It has to be access for all, and it's never about only people with developmental disabilities. As Madhurima said, for people with acquired disabilities, even a pregnant woman.
I'll give you a perfect example. We went to Mondarmani, whole family, and they have wheelchairs, which was great because we didn't need to carry our wheelchairs, but they had no ramps. And there were 3 steps down one slope, 3 steps down the other slope, no ramp.
And the gradient is like this.
And then the staff is on strike, and here are the 2 of us, my husband and myself, as the only sort of able-bodied people trying to get the 2 disabled people down those 3 steps so that they can then sit in the wheelchair and be wheeled around. And I said to them, I was forced to say to them that everything is good. Why can't you just put even like a plank on one side?
There's no penalty.
Yeah, and it is so easy.
So this goes back to corruption. I'm guessing.
I don't know.
It goes back to, no. It is insensitivity. It is insensitivity. It is an assumption of what is
we can manage
normal.
with, yes.
No, and what is normal. And what, এটা তো সবার হয়. And একটা সিঁড়ি উঠতে পারবেন না.
We are so used to managing.
That is ignorance. And people, like Reenadi said, people will not protest. They will not make a fuss. They will just say, "Acha, theek ache, forget it."
This is my next question. I mean, I think we are very good at protesting.
At one level. At one level.
And
otherwise, we would have had a revolution, When I think of the vast discrepancies that we see every single day of housing, of sanitation, you wonder, how are they keeping quiet? We have a program called Jugnu, which is a nutrition and preschool program. And we have these 70-75 little children from the neighborhood. All, I mean, only 1 or 2 have a disability. The rest of them, so they come to ISCP, they use our premises, they use our playground, and they get a nice meal and everything. And then they go back to their place. Some have no electricity. There are families living inside those big, what do they call, the pipes. There are people who have no roof. Nobody's throwing tantrums. They come smiling. So we are a very accepting lot of people.
Karma.
But you know what? I think because of that, we don't move ahead. People like us, people like you, need to join this move. It needs to become a movement. It needs to become a movement for all. Because when I fractured my foot 2 years ago, I found it so difficult to go to places. We have a very good friend who now uses a wheelchair. And she said how difficult it was for her to go and vote because of the gradient.
Yeah.
I tell people, can you imagine pushing a wheelchair up that gradient? If I fall down, I will break my neck and forget about the person on the wheelchair. So, it needs to become not just a disability thing. It needs to become for us all. It needs to become more general, equal access and opportunities.
Madhurima, one of my last questions. For Mishti, it kind of happened quite smoothly. Maybe not smoothly, but it did happen, this acceptance of the monster, etc., etc. Do you think there will be children who will continue to resist, continue to
Certainly.
to be
Certainly,
upset, throw a tantrum?
The book had to end, and it would have become tedious to go from one fractious episode to another. So that's why it ended the way it did. But yes, real life may not be like that.
May not be like
I have tried to make my characters as close to life as possible. If this was an ideal book, Mishti would have been as sweet as her name and welcoming Munni with open arms, and maybe she would have made her a gift of the bed. I don't know, but I didn't think
that wouldn't have been realistic at all.
Yeah, so I didn't think I would have done that myself. I didn't think my children would have done that. But yes, I hoped we have ground rules at home, so I hoped we would. But yes, certainly there will be children. There may be parents also who may support the children even.
Yeah.
So it's all very
okay. Reena, would you want to tell us about any one real student? You've had thousands and thousands of them. Anyone that you would want to talk about?
I know I'm fairly kind of in the continuum of age of kind of on the other side. But I haven't really known thousands and thousands, maybe a few hundred.
Okay.
Or
You were not that ancient. It is established that you are
an English teacher. Hyperbole comes very easily to me.
Yes, I can see that.
Use the hand.
No, I already spoke about a few, but very early I realized that, that I had a student called Zubin Bilimoria, and he is a Parsi little boy, and his food just looked so yummy. That keema with the potato chips, and Zubin just didn't want to eat it. So I used to say, Zubin, if you don't eat it, I will eat it. And then, so he said to me, eat it then, because I'm not going to eat it, you can do. So I dug my spoon in, and Ranu's had a similar thing with Alfonso mangoes, but I dug my spoon in, and I was just putting it into my mouth. Zubin used to have this lady who looked after him, who was scary, and she looked scary. She was about 6 feet tall and 6 feet wide, and she used to just bear down on everybody. And she came and she put her hands like this. अब भी जाके बोलेगा, अब भी जाके बोलेगा. And I went running to Sudha's office and I said, please, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do, but I ate up some of his lunch. So we've done things. And very early on, Ranu always used to tell us, never make a threat that you can't keep.
Carry on. Yeah.
And so I told Zubin, I said, if you don't finish your food, you are not going home. So he said, okay. And then, of course, we used to have one bus at that time, Mahadev Babu's bus. It was a thing and it had one trip, and you had to take that bus, and there was no way they could stay back. And there was Zubin who refused to eat. And I was thinking, God, if I say yes, then I'll get into trouble because we've been told never make a threat that you can't keep. So I sat and he sat. And I sat and he sat. And then Mahadev Babu came. Apna jonne shobai kar deri ho jacche. Everybody's going to get late. And then I said, okay. And Zubin said, I'm going home then. And off he went. So, there are so many characters we've met. We used to
entertaining ones.
Yeah, it is. We had Michael over it. And we've had other kids. Gopal, And Michael used to know every swear word in 3 languages. But I couldn't teach him any numbers or reading. But he swore in 3 languages. And every morning we'd do the morning news. That was a big thing, the news. And so everybody would tell me nice little stories. And then it would be Michael's turn. And he would give me a graphic description of his toilet experiences that morning. It was, and then after a while I realized that, by looking like this, he's just enjoying it.
Yes.
So I would kind of say, okay, that's fine. Do you have anything else to say? And then he would say, not really. And then we'd move on. But till my eyes were becoming like saucers, he would be embellishing his story. And he could feign the best epileptic fits and get out of it. Till Tessa came and joined us and said, these are not real. So just don't be impressed. So there are so many stories like that. But they were all real characters. And, I showed, there was Rajiv, who I showed this beautiful picture of this wonderful Royal Bengal tiger. And it was huge, this tiger. And there were little wisps of grass somewhere around the picture. And I said, Rajiv, what do you see? And he looked at me and he said, I see grass. So, so it's been great. Quite a lot of characters. One can write a book on that.
Of course. Okay. Questions from anyone? Observations?
We started the discussion with terminology. So lots of times, there's a lot of confusion in all kinds of sectors about terminology of various kinds. With disability, I think it's important to remember that we have a UN convention. So there is a UN convention called the UNCRPD, the UN Convention for Rights of People with Disability. So many of us like to say people with disability because we feel it has international recognition. Okay. So that's one. And the second thing I would like to say is people's efforts make a difference. I was thinking back to my time in Jadavpur University. This was in the 80s. We were all students in the 80s. And we had students who couldn't see, who came to the university. There was one man I remember, he used to get off the bus and he would just say, Acha, amake niye chalo. And we would take him by the hand and take him in. And then there was a young woman who was 1 year our junior in our department. She couldn't hear. And she was there in the English department in Jadavpur University, hanging out with all of us. And I don't think either the students or the teachers were fazed. She was there, she was part of our lives. So it makes a difference.
So if she couldn't hear, how did she manage?
Oh, she talked because she had actually turned, again, it was an acquired disability. I think something had happened when she was about 3 years old. And then she became a journalist. She used to work in the Telegraph. And yeah. And, you know, Sampati was saying, why don't people protest? People do protest. I mean, you know, I hang out with a lot of people whose a big part of their job description is protesting. So there is an organization called Shonchar that regularly, before every book fair, organizes people to say, is the book fair accessible? So things happen. Maybe some of us are not very good at publicizing what we do, but things do happen.
I said we do protest. Reena said we don't.
Enough.
Ah, exactly. Anyone else with a question, an observation?
Okay, so I was actually asking about, since you referred to a whole lot of things that I'm actually facing a lot of problems with in my school. One of them is I don't actually know how to get my students to get the disability license so that they can get accommodations from the council. They are facing a lot of problems, particularly my children who have ADHD, because it's not even in the list of disabilities in the forms. I've been looking, I have no idea how to help them with it. The psychologists are telling them they won't get a certificate unless they qualify under SLD. It's a huge, convoluted path, and none of the schools are really aware.
I think they need a proper psychodiagnostic evaluation from a registered clinic which is recognized by the government, and those anybody who tests them in those clinics, if they have an ADHD or ADD or a specific learning disability kind of descriptor, they will get their council waivers, because we've got kids. I mean, there are many registered clinics in Kolkata which are, and amongst them Breaking Through Dyslexia, Caring Minds, Crystal Clinic, and there's a whole list. And if they get their psychodiagnostic evaluation done there, they will get their council waivers. Because we've got children who've gone through examinations.
So I was advised about sending them to the
they don't need a
medical
disability certificate as such.
Okay.
They need that proper for the CISC. Which school are you?
Loreto Bovazar.
So which?
ICSE.
So it's the CISC,
just the
right?
Psychometric evaluation.
Yeah, they just need that proper psychometric.
That solves a lot of problems.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
But if I could continue.
But why was this information not
It's
shared
not easily
with her?
available.
It's not easy. But
It
if
is
you go
very
to the
difficult.
council website, just last month there was another webinar where the council actually talked about their enormously open attitude now to giving more and more facilities. But they say that we do need that evaluation, otherwise everybody is going to ask us.
But the actual process is not clearly stated.
Yeah,
that
so
just
this
send the
is
evaluation.
actually, in fact, they're very, you just have to upload that information, and they're really good about giving. The council actually, I have to say, is really pretty good about giving accommodation. It's just that they do need a piece of paper, otherwise you're going to have so many people who are going to bend the law. That's the other problem.
That's another problem.
Yeah.
I had a different kind of question. So another problem I'm facing is, so in our school we have children with autism, children with ADHD, the works, we have them. The curriculum is still forced on them. They cannot cope and they have to get through an exam. So where are they going?
No, you see, that's what real inclusion means. That you think of an alternate curriculum, you have to have modifications. You have to, because ICSE does not give modified papers only to people with visual impairment. Do they get a modified paper? Otherwise, there's no modification. That's where the National Institute of Open Schooling comes in. So any school that is really inclusive in its sort of approach needs to have, you know, some kind of affiliation, because not everybody is going to make, even with accommodations, they won't be able to do ISC or ICSE. They
Correct.
have to have something else.
No, you know,
Ah.
so as you were talking about this, Rija was talking about this, I just wanted to ask you, the little that I have read about the NEP at the school level, haven't they introduced a modified paper, you know, subject again to the paperwork and the documentation being correct?
You see, again, there's the national education policy, there are the boards of education. There's very little intersectional collaboration.
Yes.
That's where we, as people, Krishna would also tell me that working for an NGO, we are always confused. Do we come under the Ministry of Education or do we come under social welfare? We are still under social welfare. So when we go to the government, the Ministry of Education says, we don't know anything about you. You don't come, we don't come in our ambit. Because of that, you see, the NEP, we all know, has many good things. But between education, between the councils, between social welfare, at that policy making level, if there is not intersectional kind of collaboration, these things are good.
Yeah, and I just had, you know, as all of you were beginning to talk, and you mentioned Ubuntu, and I am, because we are.
Yeah.
You know, and Shampa, you were saying that how do we get this across to, you know, younger generation, to the teachers, etc. Well, this is just a personal observation which I have almost every night, that, you know, disability is within all of us. The moment I take off my spectacles, I am disabled. And, you know, when at night when I get up and I don't use my specs, I'm completely disabled. You know, so, you know, it just made me think that, you know, if we could communicate that, you know, it's something like you fractured your foot, or it could be an accident or anything
Or
which can
acquired
make us
disability,
temporarily, you know, anybody can be disabled, and so it's very usual and common to be disabled.
But I think one important thing is that next time you have a conversation, perhaps you should ask a person with disability, because we're so used to talking about people. It would be wonderful. That's why I wanted Shudipendra to be here. I feel so guilty about this actually. But it's very important actually to hear it,
From
its
them.
life experience, from people who are living the life, rather than people who are talking about.
Thank you, both of you. In February, when Priyadarshini and Amita and I, and Dr. Mukherjee, we talked about education. I hope some of you have watched that video. We did not talk about special needs or education with special children. Specifically for this reason, because it's too vast an area. I mean, we've done one whole session. I'm sure we've just touched the top of the iceberg. There's so much more to learn, so much more to be discussed. So I'm very happy that we could do this and that I have two experts sitting on my right-hand side. And we couldn't have actually asked for any better. I mean, there's so much to learn, there is so much to read up, there is so much to continuously teach us about. I mean, that is one thing that I think our professions teach us to do. We are lifelong learners. We learn every day. We learn from everyone. Even a little child can teach you so much. You were talking about space, Reena. My granddaughter who lives in Toronto is now not even 4 years old. She woke up one morning and told her father, "Baba, don't come onto my bed. I need my space now." When this was related to me, I almost had a heart attack. I thought, this is a typical North American child. Oh my God, this is who she's growing up to be. And then the same thing happened with my grandson, who's pretty much in Kolkata, bred and brought up by very sensible parents. And he also talked about, I don't like so many people around me. Tama, I don't like this. So they're very conscious of their rights. I wish we were when we were younger, but we were not. But then again, that's something we've learned. So it was a very enlightening session. Thank you, both of you. Really, it would have not been the same with any other person or with one of you not here. And thank you for coming, braving the weather. And it's always a source of, trepidation when I begin to receive messages in the morning. I can't be attending today. This is cropped up, that has happened, or whatever. But today, like Vanchita was saying, packed house, and I kept telling her that Awaj Tishna, because this is going to backfire, but it didn't. Thank you very much for coming. It's always a pleasure to have people sitting in front. We are teachers. We don't, I think we operate differently when you have people in front of us and you see their reactions and you see their faces, and it makes a lot of difference. So thank you very, very much. On that note, good night.